Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. This week, we got Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in the fight capital, bracing himself for the next monsoon. Matt Wells in the Big D. He killed it for us this past week. Great on-site coverage at UFC 277. And, of course, Danny Segura out in Miami, feeling all smug after Atleti took out United yet again this past weekend. Here we go. Let's get going. This past Saturday night, we saw Amanda Nunes handily beat Juliana Pena to recapture the UFC bantamweight title. So much so that not many people are calling for the third fight to be done immediately. Some even suggesting that the series might already be over. Guys, I got questions and I need answers. After seeing that second fight, was the first fight a fluke? And do you want to see a third fight between these two? If so, when? Goes, you're leading things off. 4 minutes.
Not a fluke. I think people need to take that word out of their vocabulary. Look, we all forget, Amanda Nunes gave us a good first round in that fight. You know how many fighters have stood toe-to-toe with Amanda Nunes in one round and gotten dispatched? It doesn't happen too often. You can't take this away from Juliana Pena. She finished her too, guys. Like, that's really, really hard to do. So to call it a fluke, I think we can't do that. We can't take it away from her. As far as rematches go, guys, if this were a stacked division, if there were a lot of worthy opponents, it's just not that. You know, I would say a rematch right now probably isn't necessary. Eventually, maybe down the road. It's just because Amanda Nunes has ran through so many fighters here at this point. The one thing that does kind of pique my interest, Valentina Shevchenko. I love that fight. But even that is a little bit in limbo because when you think about it, why have we been calling that for that fight when she's lost twice to Amanda Nunes? It's because she's been a destructive force, and we haven't seen too much of that lately. She's had some close fights here and there. So I think if you're going to do something, I think you do Valentina now while the fire's still there. We don't risk that. And then you get to Juliana Pena a little bit down the road.
All right, Matt, how about you, man? Fluke or no? Hey, I'm going to take my medicine. I kind of thought it was, but what did you think?
No, see, I think calling it a fluke is a little bit disrespectful to Juliana Pena, right? Because she prepared to the best of her ability for the biggest fight of her career, whereas on the flip side, Amanda Nunes disregarded all of the red flags going into that fight. She was coming off of COVID. She was banged up. She still thought she had that confidence that she could just go out there and run through any opponent. Well, Juliana wasn't that girl for her. So she came in not at 100% and paid the price for it. But now the thing is, we know 100% Amanda Nunes washes Juliana Pena 9 times out of 10, right? So that's why I think most people aren't really wanting to see that third fight. You know, it was kind of weird because it really didn't even come up at the post-fight press conference, right? We were talking about Valentina more than a third fight with Juliana. So I think that's where we are with this right now. You know, I wouldn't hate it if we see a third fight, but I think a third fight, as long as Amanda Nunes comes in 100% again, I think we all know what that's going to look like.
All right, Danny, what about me? You going to salvage me here? I'm out here on
I'm gonna tell Juliana Pena. I'm gonna tell. Look, I don't think it was a fluke. Fluke is like when you get caught by a punch, that one guy's been dominating the fight, and then boom, something happens. Juliana Pena systematically broke down Amanda Nunes, tagged her a bunch of times, took her down, and then choked, and then put in the rear naked choke. It was not a fluke by any means.
It wasn't even the rear naked choke, man. Amanda gave up. She just never showed.
And who broke her? Juliana Pena. It was not a fluke. You got to give it to Juliana Pena. She did the impossible and defeated Amanda Nunes. But Amanda Nunes, credit to her, she rallied back. She put in the work, and she came up with a great strategy and defeated a very tough Juliana Pena in this second bout. I do want to see a trilogy bout, but not immediate. Really, that fight was probably one of the most exciting fights that we've seen from Amanda Nunes in recent times. I mean, Juliana Pena is one of the opponents that made the champion work the most that we've seen in recent years. I think if Juliana Pena adjusts a few things here and there, plus remember they are 1-on-1, I think it could be another fun trilogy fight, and you close that chapter. But again, I think Juliana Pena does need to put in a little bit of work and make us want that trilogy fight. But I do think that should happen sometime in the future. And I got to agree with Ghost right below right here. That fight between Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko needs to happen. The UFC, this should have been a slap a wake up call. That is easily one of the biggest fights in women's MMA history to put together. And I know I'm going over here. Don't give me a yellow card just yet. But look, you almost lost it. Tayla Santos almost defeated Valentina Shevchenko. Nunes lost to Peña, and then we didn't know if she was going to come back and win. So look, now that you got them both as champion, do not make the same mistake. Do not keep cooking this fight because it might get burned in the future. Make this trilogy happen. Let's go. Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko 3. That's the fight to make.
Guys, since we went over, I can't be stranded here on Fluke Island. One of you, right? Who wants some of Debo? It was 50-43, 50-44, 50-45. I mean, come on. Like, I think the series is over, much like GSP and Matt Serra. We didn't need to run it back. In fact, Matt Serra nailed him, but that's what he does. He has a heavy right hand. I think Juliana, look, all respect, tough champion, world champion, top 5 bantamweight. Yes, I agree that she's one of the top out there, but I think that win was a fluke because I think the real Amanda didn't show. And when she did show, you guys saw what happened. Who wants some? Raise your hand.
I want some. She didn't just waltz into the press conference like John Travolta, right? She was on crutches. She didn't schedule any glamour shots for this week. Her face was busted up. You got to give Juliana Peña some credit here.
All right, maybe a yellow card to me then. Maybe Fluke is a
Give
little
her credit
bit
for
too
that
harsh.
headbutt that caused that swelling.
Maybe Fluke is a little bit too harsh, but I'll stand by this then. I'll meet you guys halfway. You guys convince me. But I think the series is over, but you guys say, hey, maybe run it back someday. It is big business, but I just think competition-wise, I think we saw why she's the GOAT. All credit to Amanda Nunes. We got to move on to the next topic, though. After Brandon Moreno's win, which netted him the UFC interim flyweight title, we saw the UFC undisputed flyweight champ, Deiveson Figueiredo, enter the octagon. UFC President Dana White revealed later in the post-fight press conference that he regretted greenlighting that moment. I, on the other hand, loved it, and I think most of the 19K and change in attendance loved it. To be fair, he says it takes away from the winner of the fight, says it feels disrespectful and rude. Do you guys like this scenario going forward? Yes, no, or you may be somewhere in between? Matt, you're going to lead things off. It's on you, sir. 4 minutes.
I'll tell you personally, I love it because it's one of those things when we look at the boxing world, boxing does it all the time, right? They'll bring in that next challenger. Coincidentally, those worlds kind of crossed when we saw Francis Ngannou step in against Tyson Fury. But I do get a little bit of what Dana's saying, right? You want to have the guy who just won to have that moment. I think the ideal way to do this sort of thing, if you are going to do it in the UFC in the future, is let the winner, let Brandon Moreno have his moment, let him run around the cage with the belt, let him do his post-fight interview with Joe, his first few questions, and then, majority of these interviews, one of the last questions is, who's next? When you get to the who's next question, then you pan over to Deiveson Figueiredo, see him walking up, and then you can do that whole little face-to-face thing. But certainly let Brandon have his moment in the octagon by himself for a little bit, but then you can bring Deiveson in and do that whole thing. I like that because it builds that tension. It builds the next step for him, so to speak, right? And I love it in this particular case, and I think this is where they should limit it, is when you have an interim title. And you have an interim title online like you did here. We all know who the next fight's going to be. So then if the guy is in attendance, why not bring him in? We all know what's next. Let's just go ahead and get that footage. Let's just build that B-roll up, so to speak, build up those promo videos. Let's get it going that way. But don't do it every time. I think you got to keep it limited a little bit.
Danny, you agree with M-Dub? What's going on here?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Matt Wells nailed it here. This is promotion 101. What is Dana talking about? Remember when Brock Lesnar came in and sort of ruined Daniel Cormier's moment, and then they pushed each other and then they never fought? Yeah, that was fun, right? How about you just go down the line? I mean, what about the I'm not impressed by your performance with the whole Matt Hughes thing? I mean, bringing in a fighter inside of the cage, fresh off of victory, getting that face off while the other guy's hot, right off a fight. I mean, that is an amazing moment that you want to make. Now, you can't do it for every fight, obviously, but when it's championship fights, when it's big fights, you make that happen. And look, Brandon Moreno, he even said it at the post-fight press conference. I don't care. Yeah, sure. Bring him in. Brandon Moreno is not in the business of cutting cool post-fight interviews. No, he's in the business of making money, prize fighting. And look, this is a fourth fight between them. You got to bring Deiveson Figueiredo in, get that face off, get that extra footage, and start selling it, because that is a really unprecedented rivalry that we've seen at 125 pounds. And yeah, it's just amazing. So I'm all for bringing in a fighter afterwards. But of course, let the champion or let the winner have his moment, get a little bit of the interview, and then you bring in the opponent. But I'm all for it. That is promotion 101.
Goes ahora tú.
All right, somebody on their phone press 9-1 and get ready to press the other one because I'm about to defend Dana White a little bit here. I don't think he makes bad points. I understand where he's coming from. How many times do we ask for fighters to get a little bit more respect? He doesn't want to ruin their moment. I get all that, but this was just the wrong time to maybe pitch that because of the scenario that my colleagues here have laid out so perfectly. Look, you got to remember, this isn't a college graduation, guys. This is prize fighting. This is his job. It's his job to promote fights. In this particular instance, I thought it made sense. And don't forget, Brandon Moreno is the guy that said, "Where is Deiveson Figueiredo?" He pointed him out in the crowd. So he initiated all that. I don't know that we could really say too much about this. It's something that fans want. It's something that happens in other sports all the time. So the question is, why doesn't it happen more often? It doesn't happen more often because rarely in the sport do we have a 1 and a 2. Do we know what the next step is? Because so much happens behind the scenes with negotiations and games that I don't think the UFC wants to put themselves in that situation where fans are demanding fights like that and they can't deliver.
I loved it. I hope he keeps doing it. I thought he was going to say it was a security issue that I kind of would have gotten. But, man, they have a great security team now that seems to be stomping out all these little fires. So, and like Go said, and Matt, I will give you a little bit of a pass because I politely disagree. I thought Brandon said that. I thought he was the one that pivoted to where's Deiveson Figueiredo. But I also know what it's like to cover an event, man. You're wearing a lot of hats, taking pictures and videos. So maybe – you missed that part, but I did think Brandon Moreno pivoted to it. So he was kind of done with his portion of, Viva Mexico, my family, my friends, and this and that. And then he went to Deiveson. But, man, I want more of these things. We do need to have good security in there to make sure nothing crazy goes down, like with Habib and Connor, of course. I get that part. But, more of it, please. All right, we got to move on here to the next one, fellas. Have we possibly ignored a new rising star in Sergei Pavlovich by focusing on the stoppage in the Pavlovich-Lewis fight? This guy is now 16-1 with 13 finishes and 11 of those in the first round. What's the ceiling for this guy? Who would you like to see him fight next? 4 minutes are on the clock. Danny, get the party started.
Yeah, this is a shame. I'm really sad to see this, that the event is over. This guy just picked up a victory, a finish over the Black Beast, who's very tough to get out of the octagon. And, he just beat a top 5 guy, and everybody's talking about the stoppage. Oh, horrible stoppage, premature, this and this. Bro, Derek Lewis fell face first to the canvas. That is literally the number one red flag that you have for a stoppage. I mean, that is an instinct. A 2-year-old falls and they put their hands in front to protect their face. I mean, that's just in our nature. So how can you debate that it was not a good stoppage when, you have a heavyweight falling face first to the canvas? And keep in mind, this isn't the third round where both guys are exhausted and maybe the output's going to be low and Derek Lewis can maybe recover. Dude, we weren't even a minute into the fight. 55 seconds came the stoppage. So no, it was a fine stoppage. Derek Lewis was well on his way out. So look, I think we should be talking about Pavlovich, about how great he looked, about his hand speed, about his knockout power, about his killer instinct, about him picking up a finish over a top 5 guy. This guy needs a big fight next. He's a clear title contender in the division. I want to see him in big fights. And look, unfortunately for Tom Aspinall, we had a 15-second fight that didn't really do much, right? So we just have a Curtis Blades, another top contender, just floating around. Why not make them fight each other? Both guys seem pretty fresh. They had quick performances, so make that this year and eliminate another contender from the list at heavyweight.
All right, Goes, what were your thoughts on this topic?
Look, I don't think it was a bad stoppage either. Maybe you could call it early, but even then, what would we be saying, right? If he landed more punches in that position with a guy that just face planted, we'd be all saying, what were you doing? What were you thinking? You got to protect these fighters. So it's a difficult situation for referees to be in. Maybe a little early, but I'll leave it at that. The division itself is bonkers, and you really have to show us something to even be named up there with the elite in this division. So I feel like he's done some good things, but there are still some questions that need to be answered. The level of competition has just been okay. This is a good test, but can he keep doing that? That's what you need in that division. You need a little bit of consistency, and we don't really know what's happening. It's really clogged at the top. On top of everything, when you throw in John Jones, you're talking about, if you're on the outside looking in, you're probably, with injuries and all that, maybe a year and a half, 2 years away from even hearing your name called out. So really, I think what he has to focus on right now is name recognition. You got to get some of these guys, like maybe a Jairzinho Rosenstruck, a good name, keep finishing guys, and then eventually, yeah, you're going to have your time. But I don't think that time's coming anytime soon, and it's not his fault.
All right. Matt Wells, finish things off.
I mean, it's you have to absolutely consider him to be one of these top contenders in the division now, right? This is fourth straight first round finish after dropping his UFC debut. But the thing is, what sucks for him is that the controversy of this stoppage is going to sour the taste of a lot of fans because they want to see that clear finish. They don't want to go back home asking questions like, what if Derek Lewis really was about to roll over to his back, figure a way to get back up and continue fighting? Because when he did drop down, he dropped down to both elbows. He didn't completely face plant, right? So it wasn't like he was completely out cold or anything like that. And we saw when the ref stopped, he immediately popped right back up. It's frustrating, I get it, but for Sergei, it's going to be one of those things where he has to go out there now and do it again against another top contender. I like the idea of like a Volkov or something. I noticed his fellow countrymen. I don't know if they would want to fight each other, but it's got to be another clear win over a top guy before we can really consider him to be in that title mix. Like you guys have said already, the top is pretty crowded right now, and finding your way through that, despite the impressive performances so far, I need to see some more. I would like to see what he does in the second round. We haven't seen him in the second round yet in the UFC. It's all been first rounds. What does he look like later in the fights? I want to see it. So we just need more film on him, I think, at this point. You know, let's see him get in there against someone else. And if he does it again and does it again after that, then, hey, you can't deny it. But got some more work to do right now.
Yeah, dude's got a vicious uppercut too, man. Those stats are pretty outstanding. And that one win over the Black Beast goes a long way because that's a two-time title challenger. So, Pavlovich, we're giving you some love. You didn't seem you got much on Saturday. All right, we got to move on to topic number 4. Amanda Nunes is back to champ status. And there's all kinds of possibilities for her in the bantamweight division. But what about this featherweight division? The UFC featherweight division is shallow with 5 fighters signed to the division. 2 are 0-0. They've recently been signed. 2 are 0-2. And in most divisions, they'd be in danger of getting cut. Chris Cyborg wants the box. Kayla Harrison re-signed with PFL. So I know there's 45ers out there that could, you know, obviously contend against the champ here, but they're not there. They're outside the UFC. Should the UFC shelve this division for now? That is the question. We're back to goes. 4 minutes. Go ahead.
And man, to answer the question, yes, I believe it needs to go away. It just doesn't really entertain me that much. We rarely ever talk about this division. There aren't really true featherweights there. It's mostly people going up in weight to just sort of fill the void so Amanda can take pictures with 2 belts. That's great. That especially when you're talking Mount Rushmore, the greatest female fighter of all time, it really helps. I don't think Dana White's a moron, though, and I'm sure the matchmakers get sick of trying to figure out ways to fill that void at featherweight. So I think the only reason it sticks around is because of Kayla Harrison and the opportunity that possibly one day she could come in and do something. And I know the UFC just passed on her, but if you look at what she's getting paid, that probably wouldn't have made sense in the UFC. So I think they want to do things on their terms, and eventually that could be a possibility. But how long are you going to sit around and wait for that possibility to happen? I don't know. It's a big money fight, but I wouldn't say it's huge, guys. So in the meantime, it's just kind of an eyesore. Like every time she takes a fight up there, nobody's really tripping on what's going to happen, what the outcome's going to be. Is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't think so, guys.
And by the time Harrison comes over, Amanda may already be gone and still no Cyborg. And Dana White is not a moron. Obviously, this business is ultra successful, but at one point he got rid of 55. What do you think about this, Matt?
I think it's interesting because Amanda's in a very unique spot to where she is kind of at the tail end of her career, right? She's already beaten everyone. If I could draw a parallel to the pro wrestling world, you know, Roman Reigns is at the top, right? He's the undisputed. He's got 2 belts over his shoulder too, right? His famous saying, "I'm wrecking everyone and then I'm leaving." Well, Amanda Nunes has wrecked everyone except for a few names that aren't really realistic possibilities in Kayla Harrison. You know, she signed over at PFL. Will it happen? Who knows? But I like the idea of keeping the division open in case if that were to be a possibility somewhere down the road within the next couple of years. who knows what could happen if PFL decides to say, hey, yeah, you can go over there and do this thing with the UFC, and the UFC is cool with it. Leave it open. Why would you want to strip her of that belt when that marketing tool of 2 belts looks pretty good on all those promo packages, right? So you might as well leave it there. It's not hurting anybody to have that division open, because who knows what can happen. We could see a contender pop up out of nowhere. I mean, obviously it doesn't happen all that often in women's MMA versus men's MMA, but the idea of Amanda Nunes, the double champ, just sounds so much sweeter. So might as well keep it there for the remainder of her career. Once she retires, shut it down.
All right. How about you, Danny?
I agree. The more gold, the better. I think it's not hurting. It's not like they're stopping to sign fighters because they got to keep 145 open. No, it's just there. It's just there. And look, it makes it nice for the pictures. I think being a double champion really contributed a lot to this version of Amanda Nunes, what we refer to as the greatest of all time. I mean, sure, if she would have been only the champion at 135, I think we still would have been seeing her the same way. But that win over Chris Cyborg, going up and down between weight classes, even though 145 is not that strong, it's definitely added to her resume. So, look, I'm all for keeping the division open. In fact, I would like for the UFC to maybe put in a little bit more effort. And instead of having 4 or 5 fighters signed to the division, I don't know, have 10. You don't need to have an entire 15 to fill out the rankings, but do put a little bit more substance, because you never know. Maybe you get like an up and coming prospect at 145 that might not look like the biggest deal, but maybe in a few years she does. You don't know that. I mean, MMA is full of surprises, right? So I'm all for keeping that division open. It makes Amanda look better, and also, as you guys alluded, that possibility of Kayla Harrison, although it doesn't seem very likely at the moment, you never know. A trade can happen. We've seen crazy things happen in the sport. And if you close that division, reopening it back up again will be like a whole ordeal. So just keep it open for now. You never know when you'll need it.
All right. I think you guys may have convinced me. I really don't like the division. Haven't liked it. 235ers open things up in home and GDR. Then GDR didn't want to defend. I don't know. With what I saw with lightweight years ago, remember that was Matt Serra, BJ Penn, Jens Pulver, and then flyweight almost went away. I felt like the UFC said, hey, we just don't have enough bodies. We're moving on. That's why I wanted them to apply it to this division. But you're right, guys. There could be some big fights that could happen, so let's hang on to it. Doesn't bother anyone. All right, let's finish up here. The PFL begins their playoffs this week. Lose and you're out. Forget about points and standings. Guys, give me a long shot or a dark horse and a guarantee from amongst the 6 divisions that will be contested in these next 3 weeks in New York, in Wales, and in England. Matt, you're on the clock. 4 minutes. Take it away.
Ooh, I'm actually really excited to see this season or this playoffs play out. Let me go with a long shot here. I'll start it off in the lightweight division. Anthony Pettis is going to be my long shot. He's heading into this rematch with Stevie Ray. He's just coming off that loss to him. But listen to some of the things that he said after the fact, that he knew he was going to be in the playoffs, so he did take his foot off the gas. He didn't take it as serious as maybe he should, so to speak, right? So I like him to come out with a little bit more urgency, a little bit more fire under him, and go ahead and kind of right that wrong there and advance on. And for a guarantee, if you'd like a guarantee, let's go to the light heavyweight division. Give me Josh Silveira to run the table. I think he runs that table pretty smoothly. Omari's going to be a tough opening fight, I think. But I think he's going to surprise a lot of people and really show how good he is. American top team, home product there.
Yeah, for sure. For those that don't know, Shoeface is out. Stepping in is Josh Silveira. All right, good stuff from Matt Wells. Danny, you're next.
Yeah, this is a fun one. Obviously, I think the guarantee for everyone's Kayla Harrison, but for the sake of this exercise, let's remove her here. I'm gonna go with my second guarantee. I'm gonna go with over at the heavyweight bracket. I'm gonna go with the Brazilian Renan Ferreira, who absolutely looks like a monster. I mean, I do think the guy's the real deal, and I do think he's gonna be champion. And look, in many people's eyes, he tapped. I mean, he beat Fabricio Werdum, right? But then we had that whole controversy. And look, he's back in the playoffs, and he's looking good. I got him to win the whole thing. And as far as a long shot, I'm going to go with Bubba Jenkins. I know he's had some hiccups here and there in the past. I know that maybe he hasn't lived up to the expectations that maybe had held him to. But I do think he's a fantastic fighter. I do think if he just tweaks a few things, he's on to great things. I do think he has an awesome background and pedigree. A bit of a long shot. I know that featherweight division, I know that featherweight playoffs is tough, but I kind of like him as well to win it.
NC2A champ. Yeah, I like Bubba Jenkins. All right. How about you guys?
Look, anybody that's a fan of the PFL knows that the season and the playoffs are completely different. These guys take it up a level here. Trust me, I know a lot of fighters don't like to admit it, but they hold back during the regular season. During the playoffs is when they unleash hell. And when you're going to see hell, and this is my guarantee, Chris Wade and Brendan Loughnane. Those two are going to kill each other. Their skill set is great. They have great skills as far as being well-rounded, taking the fight to each other. But here's the thing, man. They have heart, both of them. So I think they're going to have an insane fight. I guarantee you're going to love that one. It's going to be a dogfight. Where I do think a little bit of a long shot, but maybe when we're done, maybe somebody like Mike Bond can dig up some stats. I think regardless of Anthony Pettis wins or not, I think he's going to make more money than anyone, than all these millionaires here. Yeah, I got a great contract. Who knows what he gets outside and endorsements or whatever. Every time we talk to him, he's got a new watch that blinds us or a new necklace or something. That kid's got it dialed in, and I actually do think he's going to do well. Stevie Ray, tough fight for him, but I think that's going to be a really good one as well.
Yeah,
You know,
this is going to be.
Let me dive in real quick before we completely skip over this one topic here. This playoff, we're heading to probably one of the most intriguing matchups in PFL history. This rematch between Kayla Harrison and Larissa Pachenko is on the horizon. Larissa Pachenko has been looking fantastic this year, so I'm really excited to see how that one plays out. But I wouldn't exactly call that a guarantee or a long shot for either one of them. But the most anticipated fight for me is going to be that one, I think.
Yeah, Pacheco's been formidable over in the 35 division, 45 division, and now in the 55 division. If she can take out Kayla Harrison, wow, that would be huge. And she's arguably given her the toughest matchups. So good call there. All right, guys, great stuff. Really, really enjoyed hanging out with you guys here for this week's Spinning Back Clique. And of course, this week, more UFC headed your way. Santos and Hill and the PFL playoffs, they get underway as well. So, bunch more stuff. Go to the schedule link there, tab, on MMA Junkie and check out what's on the horizon. And of course, we'll see you all here next week so we can recap it on the Spinning Back Clique.